Welcome to Carolina Fishing TV's Cape Lookout Experience. We arrived Friday afternoon, loaded with gear for a great weekend. Owners Mac and Brenda, who started Cape Lookout Cabins and Camps ferry service in the spring, are fans of the show and wanted to share with our viewers a unique adventure filled with great fishing, history, biology, and nature at its finest. We made a last-minute stop to load up with tackle, ice, snacks, and supplies. It was time to load the 2 o'clock ferry. After a few minutes of positioning the vehicles, we got underway for the 3-mile, 45-minute ride. Great time to deflate the tires for better traction in the sand and chat with Mac about what he had lined up for us. As you can see, we came into the heels of 10 inches of rain, so there was some water to navigate, but it really wasn't bad as expected. After offloading the vehicles, we checked in with the Park Service about their cabin and made immediate way to Cape Point, where we heard of a large school of big redfish. Because of the water, it took us about an hour to reach the point, and it's about a 14-mile drive. When we arrived, several guys were hooked up with some nice upper slot reds.
Do this all the time. He's close. You the same place last time. Yeah, Rob. I do this all the time. I tell these guys where to cook.
After filming some of the action, I couldn't resist the opportunity, and sure enough, now more than 10 minutes in the water, we were all hooked up on some nice fish. What a blast. As the sun set, we packed up and made our journey north to the cabin. We have an early start with park biologist Karen Altman to check the turtle nests, plus a full day of exploring the island and catching fish.
I'm Karen Altman. I work for the Resource Management Division of the park. We're in charge of protecting the park's natural resources, and that includes searching for and monitoring nesting sites of protected species such as our birds and sea turtles. Today we're at a loggerhead sea turtle nest. So we are in hatching season right now. After a nest hatches, we go in and excavate it. What we're looking for is to see how many eggs have hatched, how many turtles made it out of the nest successfully, how many didn't hatch, just to get an overall view as to our success rate. We come by every day and check, and we'll look for like this depression here in the sand where the hatchlings start to come out of their eggs and they work their way up in the sand column. It displaces the sand and leaves this depression. So once we start to see this, we know either the hatchlings have come out or are ready to come out. So this one hatched 5 days ago, so we're ready to go ahead and excavate and see how well it did. Down in here, this is where the nest cavity is. It's nice and soft. And we're going to do by hand first until we hit that screen. There's a flipper right there. So, yeah, we want to gently just kind of help him come out. There's our first little hatchling. What we're going to do, we'll go ahead and put him in this bucket and keep him kind of sheltered until we get the rest of the nest dug up. And If he has any siblings, we'll let them all go together. Just make sure that there isn't any.
There's another one.
That's what we want to make sure before we start digging too hard. Now during nesting season, we start doing our patrols early in the morning. We cover all of the beaches by ATV and actually look for tracks. You can see the tracks where the female has come out of the water the night before, and you'll see a big area of sand disturbance, and that's how we know where the nest site actually is. And once we see that, we confirm all of our nests. So we do dig down into all those areas and locate exactly where the nest is at. Predator cages, which we're getting to, on all of our nests to help protect against predation from raccoons. The incubation is typically about 60 to 65 days. So at about day 50 is when we'll come out and we'll close down the section of beach. Any tire marks or anything like that, the beach is nice and smooth, so the hatchlings don't have any obstacles when they make their way to the ocean. Nesters that we have are the loggerheads, and we do have green sea turtles and occasional leatherbacks. The leatherbacks, when they nest, they usually nest earlier in the season than the rest of them do. Since we're at the northernmost limits of the nesting areas, they believe that we're an important producer of males. We're in the northern climates, we have cooler nesting beaches, so they think we produce more males than females. Participating in a study where we actually take little hobo temperature data loggers, and we'll bury them in the nests and also do a sand temperature right next to the nest. And after the nest is hatched, we collect those hobos and download the temperature data. It's set to collect temperatures every 2 hours. So you can see the eggs are, they're not like a chicken egg where they're hard. They're really soft and leathery. And that's when the female is laying her eggs, she digs this pit so the eggs drop into it. And it helps with like a shock absorber. If they were hard, they'd hit and break, but this way they just kind of dent and form into each other. We first locate the top of the nest. We measure down to the depth of where the eggs first are. When we remove the eggs, we measure the width and the depth again of the nest so we can recreate the nest cavity as best as humanly possible. So really the hatchlings at night, if we put the screens on to protect against raccoons digging down into the nest site, but once they come out of the nest, there's no protection for them. They're kind of on their own to get by the raccoons and the ghost crabs. The ghost crabs are pretty abundant at night out here. Each female can lay up to about 6 or 7 nests per season, and then they take a season off. So they're laying about every other year or every 3 years. Are you at the bottom of the nest? Let's go ahead and let these hatchlings go. And then we'll come back and we'll count these out. We'll put them in piles of 10. We're just going to move them down the beach a little bit closer to the tide. They've got a long ways to go yet. We continue to monitor for new nest sites up until September 15th. And that's what we'll see in the morning after a hatch. When we come up on the nest site, we'll see, a bunch of those little tracks going into the ocean. They're both in?
There it is. Might take a while to get out.
We can check the stage of development. Usually if they haven't hatched by this point in time, they're not going to. So we'll go through, we'll count the eggshells, put them into piles of 10 just to count and see how many were actually in the nest. And then we can figure out what the success of the nest was. Okay, so our total clutch then was 107.
This dude welcomed us to the north end of the island, just over Ophelia Inlet, cut by Hurricane Ophelia is Portsmouth Island. Then it's back to base camp to load up and head south for history. Ran into Mac preparing drum nuggets for dinner.
Now you talking about good eating, you see it right there? That's what I call drum nuggets. That stuff there is fitting to eat. Y'all can tell I try not to waste no meat.
I want to be able to read a newspaper when you're done with that.
Okay. I'll see what I can do.
The lighthouse that you see here was built in 1859, which 150 years ago. That's why this year the National Park is going to celebrate the 150th anniversary of when the light first went in service on November 1st. It's 150 feet from the mean level of the sea to the light. And that's important because that determines how far out to sea you're able to observe the light. I was in the Navy and we went up and down the coast here many times. And on the Mariner's chart, Cape Lookout is designated with a W, which stands for white light, which it is, 15 seconds, which means every 15 seconds the light would flash. At night, it's not a problem because each lighthouse has a unique flash pattern. Daytime, when this was first built, the Lighthouse Board built 3 other lighthouses with a similar design as this one. This was the first, like I say, in 1859. Hatteras, as you go on up the coast, around 1870. Body, and then the last one on the North Carolina coast was Currituck. All 4 of them were built out of the red brick that you see here on this sidewalk. Well, at night, like I say, it was not a problem because each had a unique flash pattern. But in the daytime, the mariners would look ashore and they'd see a red lighthouse. Where am I? They could be up at Currituck, they could be at Hatteras, they could be here at Cape Lookout. So they petitioned the government, and finally, in their wisdom, in 1873, they built this structure, and they also painted the lighthouses. This pattern was designated diagonal checkers. You can see the white and black squares. Now, they look like diamonds, but because they're on a slant, they call them diagonal checkers. The thing that's unique about this lighthouse is probably this way, the only one in the world, is when you look at the pattern, you can actually tell which direction you're facing. The black diamonds are north and south, and the white are east and west. They also had a previous lighthouse built in this location, about 200 yards southeast of the present structure, on the mound out there beyond these trees. The original lighthouse was built in 1812, so it wasn't very tall, only about 107 feet. In that era, the only lighting mechanism they had was oil lamps. Well, the problem, this wasn't a very bright light. At night, the mariners would kind of search for it because they wanted to know where they were. And because a few miles down the island here at the point, that reef goes out 18 to 20 miles. So what would happen is, of course, the ships would run aground trying to find the original light. Not a good situation. So they finally built the second light much taller, a much brighter light. So one of the duties of the light keeper, he had to take a 5-gallon drum of oil and run up, well, walk up the 201 steps to the workroom, and then he had another 15 steps or so on to get up to the light to fill the reservoir for the light. It is still considered an aid to navigation, and the Coast Guard is responsible for the maintenance of the light and the mechanism that makes it turn every 30 seconds. The fuel that was used, first it was oil, caused a lot of soot, a lot of work for the keepers. Every morning they had to clean everything up and polish the lens and so on. The lens that was in this lighthouse originally was what they call a first order lens. It was the largest Fresnel lens that's manufactured today. There are actually 2 bulbs in each of those beacons and if one burns out, the other one takes over. 1979, they brought a cable over from Harker's Island to provide power, not only for the lighthouse, but for this structure as well. They had 3 lightkeepers assigned to this station. This house that was built, like I say, in 1873, housed 2 of the assistant lightkeepers and their families. The head lightkeeper was actually located where that replica white summer kitchen is off to the right there. Originally, this island was connected to Shackelford Banks over where the horses are now. And there was a community over there called Diamond City of people that did fishing and whaling, about 600 or 700 people. So they weren't that isolated. And then in 1932, a hurricane went up through the sound and opened up the channel and kind of separated these 2 land masses. So Shackelford Banks is now its own island, and the Army Corps of Engineers keep the channel open with dredging periodically because it's more convenient and it's a shorter trip from the mainland to come out here to visit the lighthouse. But there's usually someone here every day. They're fishermen, go out on the beach and surf fish, and people camp overnight. So there's plenty to do here on the island.
Back to the point for more fishing. As soon as we arrive, Jim's pulling in a nice Spanish. And Mac hooks up with a big red. After losing one, he lets this one run out for a while.
There, buddy, that's just as good as it gets. You can't beat that with a big stick.
Debbie pulls in a nice bluefish just after that. I'll tell you, there's nothing better than cooking up a day's catch. Thanks to Mac, Brenda, and Stan for treating us to drum nuggets, shrimp, and crab cakes. A few fixings, and it's on. Chats with the park ranger, a perfect sunset, raging fire, and a good game of cornhole with family and friends. Well, life just doesn't get any better than this. After breakfast on Sunday and cleanup, we head south to the rock jetty for flounder, Spanish, and blues. Then it's back to the ferry where reality sets in. Back to work week in anticipation of another weekend of fishing and adventure.